I thought I had buried him years ago. Not literally. That came later. But emotionally? Spiritually? He was already dead to me by the time I turned 16. You can only wait so long for someone to come back before the waiting becomes a wound. So when I opened the door that morning and saw a cardboard box sitting on my porch, sealed with brown tape and a single note attached to the top, I felt my stomach turn before I even touched it. It read, "To Caleb, these are yours now. E." No return address. No explanation. I almost didn't open it. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, frozen. My son was inside the house watching cartoons. My wife was still asleep. And I was holding a box that buzzed with something ancient. I carried it to the garage. Closed the door. Sat on the concrete floor like a teenager again, knees up, heartbeat loud. And slowly, I cut the tape. Inside were 37 envelopes. All addressed to me. Each one marked with a date. My birthday. One for every year since I was born. I didn't know what to think. My hands were shaking. I pulled out the one on top. Year 1. It was creased, soft, handwritten. No postage. Which meant he never sent it. "My boy," it began. I couldn't read the rest at first. Not because it was illegible, but because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for softness. For love. For words from a man who never said them when it counted. But I read it. And it broke me. He talked about the moment he held me in the hospital. Said he didn't know how to be a father. That he was scared he'd break me. That I looked like forgiveness wrapped in skin. He said he cried when I grabbed his finger. He said he loved me. And I hated him for it. Because how do you tell someone you love them, and then disappear? How do you write that down and never send it? I pulled out the second letter. Year 2. It was shorter. More tired. He wrote about the divorce. Said my mom was trying to do everything right. Said he wasn't. That he didn't know how to fight for us. "You won't remember this," he wrote. "But I missed your second birthday. I told myself I'd make the next one. I didn't." I closed the letter. Put it back in the box. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I was 34 years old, sitting in a garage, crying like the boy I used to be. The one who stood by the window every weekend, asking my mom if he was coming this time. He never did. Until now. In ink. An apology is too late to matter. I wanted to burn the box. Throw it in the trash. Erase it like I tried to erase him. But I didn't. Because somewhere in that box was the truth. And I wasn't sure I could live without it anymore. I took the rest of the letters out one by one. Lined them up. 37 years of silence suddenly made visible. I didn't read them all that day. But I knew I would. And I knew deep down that they would change everything. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it shows up on your doorstep, wrapped in cardboard, sealed with regret, and begging you to look back. And God help me, I did. My boy. That's how it starts. No date. No signature. Just those two words, like a whisper echoing through time. I read it again that night. In my office, door closed, the sound machine on so my wife wouldn't hear me break again. The letter was already soft at the corners, like it had been handled too many times. Maybe he wrote it more than once. Maybe he held it, read it back, folded it up, and didn't have the courage to send it. Maybe he never meant to. You came into this world with your fists clenched and your eyes wide. Like you were already ready to fight. Like you knew this world would be hard, and you weren't scared. Not even a little. I paused there. My son had been born the same way. It struck me, the symmetry of it. The repetition. The way we inherit patterns even when we don't mean to. I held you for less than an hour. That was all they gave me. But in that hour, I felt something I can't name. Not just love. Something heavier. Like I was being handed a second chance at everything I'd ever screwed up in my life. I swallowed hard. He went on about my mom. How strong she was. How beautiful. How scared. He said she held me longer than he did, but not by much. We were kids, Caleb. We didn't know what we were doing. We thought love would fix everything, but love doesn't pay bills or make people less broken. I wanted to stay. I did. But I felt like a fracture waiting to happen. That sentence stayed with me. A fracture waiting to happen. What kind of man sees himself that way? And what kind of man lets that fear make the choice for him? The letter wasn't long, but it was honest. Too honest. Not the kind of thing you send in a birthday card. It didn't say, "Happy birthday." It didn't say, "I love you," at the end. But it started with "my boy," and something about that made me feel 5 years old again. I read it 6 times. I read it until the words started to lose meaning and turn into music. A sad, quiet song that filled the room. He said he kept the hospital wristband. That he carried it in his wallet for 3 years. That it was the only proof he had that he'd ever been part of my life. That made me angry. Because he could have had more. He chose not to. And yet, here was this letter. This window into a man I'd spent decades trying not to become. I started writing things down. Not because I wanted to forgive him, but because part of me needed to understand him. If I could trace the shape of his cowardice, maybe I could make sure it didn't fit me. I looked at a photo of him I found once in a drawer when I was 10. He had a mustache, sunglasses, the kind of smile people fake when they're unsure. I remember thinking, he looks like a stranger. Now he looked like someone trying to be known. I flipped the letter over. On the back, written in smaller print, was one last sentence. "Maybe you'll hate me one day. Maybe you already do. But if you ever read this, know that I didn't forget you. Not for a single breath." I stared at that line for a long time. Because the truth was, I had forgotten him. I'd forced myself to. I'd built a wall and plastered it with every moment he missed. Every question I asked my mom that started with, "Why doesn't he? Why doesn't he call? Why doesn't he send presents? Why doesn't he care?" And now here was this letter, proof that maybe he did. Or at least, that he wanted to. Wanting isn't the same as doing. But it's something. It's a ghost knocking at the walls I built. And I felt them crack. I placed the letter back into its envelope and slid it into a folder marked Year 1. Then I opened Year 2 again, this time with less anger, more curiosity. If he wrote these every year, I wanted to know what changed. What stayed the same. Who he became across 37 birthdays. Maybe I wouldn't find forgiveness. But I might find the man. And that, somehow, felt like enough, for now. I turned out the light. And left the office door cracked. Just in case another ghost decided to visit. Caleb. That's how this one starts. Not "my boy" this time. Not with warmth. Just my name. Plain. Quiet. Already heavier than it should be. I waited a week before reading it. I kept walking past the box like it was a grave I wasn't ready to dig up. My son was learning how to write his name in crayon on the kitchen table, asking me how to spell superhero. My wife was humming something soft while folding laundry. And I was in the corner of it all, carrying a father-shaped silence that wouldn't let go. When I finally sat down to read the Year 5 letter, it felt colder. The handwriting was the same, but shakier. Slanted. The ink smudged in places. Like maybe he wrote it with trembling hands. Or maybe he cried while writing. I didn't know which I hated more. 5 years. I miss so much already. Your first steps. Your first word. Your laugh. I stopped right there. Because I didn't remember laughing much as a kid. I remember asking questions. I remember wondering. I remember the silence that followed most of my birthdays. I remember the sound of my mom trying to sing louder than the empty chair at the table. Your mother hasn't returned my calls. I felt a knot twist in my stomach. Because this was the first time the blame showed up. I don't blame her. Not entirely. But I want you to know, I tried. I tried to come see you that summer. She told me it wasn't a good idea. That you were confused. That it would hurt you more than help you. I wanted to scream. Because who was telling the truth? I remembered that summer. Not clearly, but in fragments. A cake with a train on it. A piñata that wouldn't break. My uncle standing too close. My mom smiling too hard. But I don't remember him. Because he wasn't there. I did something, Caleb. Something I can't write down here. Not yet. But your mother, she had her reasons. And I had mine. There it was. The drop. The chill. The moment when the letters stopped being sad and started being something else. I read that line over and over. I did something. What the hell did he do? I checked the envelope. Nothing else inside. No hidden page. Just that hanging thought, like a blade dangling above the next 32 letters. I'm sorry for what I did. I hope one day I can explain it to you. I hope I get to. Hope. That word, in his hands, felt selfish. Like a thief asking for forgiveness while still holding what he stole. I leaned back in the chair, letter pressed to my chest. It felt like I was holding a confession that refused to finish. He wasn't asking me to understand. He was asking me to wait. To keep reading. To keep digging. To chase him through ink and paper for answers he was too afraid to give all at once. But here's the thing about wounds, you don't get to pace the healing. You don't get to reveal your guilt in chapters, hoping the pain softens with each reveal. I wanted to throw the letter across the room. Instead, I read it again. If I could go back and undo it all, I would. I would have fought harder. I would have stayed longer. I would have learned how to be the man you needed instead of the man I was afraid I'd become. There it was again. The fracture. The fear of becoming something. Or someone. He never said who. But I could guess. The man who raised him. In part 2, he talked about his father in passing. About how silence ran in our blood. How vanishing was a language we inherited without ever learning. How some men think leaving is mercy. I saw myself in that. Saw the outline of what could have been if I hadn't chosen differently. If I hadn't sat through every panic attack in the car before walking back into the house. If I hadn't whispered, "I'm here," even when I wanted to be anywhere else. But this letter, felt like a turning point. Like he was finally about to tell me who he really was. Or maybe who he had been. They say the truth sets you free. But sometimes the truth is a prison. One you walk into willingly, because living with the lie is worse. That line punched through me. Because I knew what it meant to live with a lie. For most of my life, the lie was simple. He didn't want me. But now I wasn't sure what to believe. Maybe he did want me. Maybe he was kept away. Or maybe he wanted to come back, but not enough. Maybe he loved me in theory. In private. In letters. But never enough to break through the walls he let stay up. Happy birthday, Caleb. I know it doesn't mean much now. But I lit a candle anyway. Just for you. That was the end. No. Love, Dad? No name at all. Just that line. That flicker. That image of a man alone in a room lighting a candle for a boy he left behind. I sat with it. Let it ache. Then I opened my laptop. Searched for his name. Obituary. Memorial page. Comments from people I didn't know. Some called him a kind man. Some said he was distant. One said, "He had a good heart, just a bad past." That felt like a headline for this whole story. I closed the browser. Went to my son's room. Watched him sleep. And wondered how a man ever walks away from this. I whispered, "I'm sorry," even though it wasn't me who left. And promised myself, again, that I wouldn't. No matter what was in the next letter. No matter what truth was coming. Because I wasn't just reading these for him. I was reading them for me. And maybe, just maybe, for my son too. Because stories don't just shape us. They ripple. And I needed to know how deep this one went. The envelope for year 11 was thinner than the rest. It looked like it had been folded and unfolded too many times, as if he couldn't decide whether to send it, keep it, or burn it. I could tell before I even opened it that something inside this one would hurt. I waited until after midnight. Everyone was asleep. I sat in the kitchen, the light above the stove the only thing keeping the dark from swallowing the room whole. I opened the envelope slowly, like it might bite. The first line didn't disappoint. "She's lying to you." Just that. No. Caleb. No. My boy. No preamble. Just those 4 words, dropped like a match on dry grass. My hands tightened. I read on. "By now, you're old enough to start asking questions. Maybe you already have. Maybe she's already given you the version of the story that paints her as the hero and me as the villain." My jaw clenched. Because I had asked? And my mom had told me things. That he was immature. That he wasn't ready. That he made promises he didn't keep. That he left because he was scared, and she didn't have the energy to chase him down. She never called him names. She never poisoned me against him. But she never defended him either. The truth is more complicated. But she won't tell you that. Because complicated doesn't make for bedtime stories. Complicated doesn't let you sleep easy. I hated that he was right. Because I had slept easier believing he was the villain. It was simpler. Cleaner. He abandoned us. She picked up the pieces. End of story. But now I was holding evidence of a longer version. I did something wrong. I told you that in another letter. And I'll keep saying it because I don't want to dodge it. But it wasn't just me. She made a choice too. And the older you get, the more I hope you realize that people don't just disappear. They get pushed. They get erased. I stopped. Stared at the page like it might change. Erased? That was a different word. Erased meant she didn't just let him go. It meant she made sure he stayed gone. I didn't want to believe that. Because my mother was my everything. She raised me alone. Worked 2 jobs. Missed sleep and meals and her own joy to make sure I had enough of mine. She carried me through heartbreak, braces, bullies, and biology tests. But there were gaps. Questions she never answered. Why didn't he show up for court dates? Why was there never any money? Why did I have to call him Eric instead of Dad when I asked about him? When I said she was lying to you, I didn't mean with her words. I meant with her omissions. With the things she let you believe without correcting. With the way she painted silence as safety. I read that line again. The way she painted silence as safety. I thought of the nights she held me after I had nightmares. The way she told me it was okay, that I didn't need to know everything. That some things were better left in the past. But what if the past wasn't gone? What if it had just been redacted? You'll hate me for this. I know you will. You'll feel like I'm trying to tear her down. I'm not. I'm trying to give you back the truth. Because you deserve all of it. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. The paper crinkled in my grip. I wanted to stop reading. But I couldn't. Because something in me, a voice I hadn't listened to in decades, was whispering that this letter mattered more than the others. That this was where the story really started. The last time I tried to see you, you were 5. I had a gift. A small one. A truck, I think. She met me in the parking lot. Told me you didn't want it. Told me to leave before you saw me. Said it would confuse you. Said it would undo everything she was building. So I did. I left. And I cried the whole way home. That memory hit like a punch to the gut. I remembered that truck. It was wrapped in newspaper, no card. I remember thinking it came from my uncle. I remember my mom saying, "Someone left it at the door." She lied. Not to hurt me. But still. She lied. And I believed her. There are things I want to tell you, Caleb. Things I couldn't fit in a single letter. Things I couldn't say until you were older. And maybe you're ready now. Maybe not. But you have the rest of the box. You have the rest of me. I stood up. Paced. Felt like the walls were closing in. Because the truth was shifting. It was slippery now. Complicated. Just like he said? And I didn't know who to believe. But I knew I couldn't go back to pretending I knew the whole story. I looked at my phone. Opened a message thread with my mom. Typed 3 words. Can we talk? Then I deleted it. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. I folded the letter. Put it back in the envelope. Labeled it in my notebook, Year 11, Truth Begins. Because whatever came next, I wasn't reading a story anymore. I was unraveling one. And I had no idea where it would end. The thing about grief is, it doesn't arrive on time. It sneaks in sideways. Through a sound. A smell. A memory you didn't know you had. The thing about truth? It's even worse. It doesn't knock. It rips the door off the hinges. It was a Tuesday. That forgettable part of the week that never means anything, until it does. I had gone back to the box. Not because I was ready. But because I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. You have the rest of the box. You have the rest of me. I started looking for answers like a man digging through rubble after an earthquake. I needed to find what caused the collapse. Not just for him. For me. That's when I noticed it. Tucked inside the lining of the box, beneath the envelope labeled Year 12, was something else. A second envelope. Smaller. Unmarked. I almost missed it. It wasn't numbered. Wasn't written in the same handwriting. It was sealed with red wax. Different from all the others. Like it wasn't part of the plan. Like it had been hidden. I turned it over. No name. No birthday. Just a single word scratched into the fold. Don't. That should have stopped me. It didn't. I opened it. And I swear to God, it changed everything. It wasn't a letter to me. It was a letter about me. Or maybe for someone else. Someone I hadn't heard of. Not yet. Elena, it began. The handwriting was rough. Slanted. Familiar. But tired. It looked like he wrote it in a panic. Or a moment of clarity he didn't want to keep. I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret. He deserves to know. But I don't know how to tell him. I thought time would make it easier. It hasn't. It's made it worse. I stopped breathing. Because I had never heard the name Elena before. She wasn't a friend of my mom's. Not an aunt. Not a teacher. But the way he wrote to her, it was personal. Intimate. Someone he trusted. Someone who knew. I told her it wasn't mine. That I didn't remember. That the timing didn't make sense. But deep down I knew. I've always known. From the first moment I saw him. Those eyes. I stood up so fast the chair screeched across the floor. Those eyes. He was talking about me. I thought maybe I could live with a lie. That I could still love him as my own. That I could stay and make it right. But then she told me the truth. She told me he might not be mine. My knees gave out. I sat back down. Couldn't look at the page. Couldn't look away. She said there had been someone else. Just once. And she wasn't sure. But that was enough to break me. Enough to make me afraid to get too close. Enough to make me disappear. The paper shook in my hands. He thought I wasn't his. And maybe I wasn't. I never told Caleb. Never had the guts. I convinced myself it didn't matter. That love was enough. That blood wasn't the only thing that made a father. But the doubt ate me alive. I started pulling away before I ever left. I stared at those words. And something inside me cracked open. Because this wasn't abandonment. It was fear. The fear of loving something that might not belong to you. The fear of staying when every whisper in your head says you shouldn't. If he finds this letter, it means I didn't have the courage to face him with the truth. It means I failed twice. Once by leaving. And again by staying silent. I folded the page slowly. My breath was shallow. My hands numb. And then I opened the next envelope. Year 12? Hoping for clarity. For contradiction. For something that would undo what I had just read. But the next letter didn't mention the doubt. It was all surface. A birthday wish. A memory of the first time I rode a bike. A line about how proud he was of me. No mention of DNA. Of mistakes. Of Elena. He had buried the truth. He gave me love in one hand. And silence in the other. I didn't sleep that night. I kept rereading that hidden letter. Kept wondering who she was. What my mom knew. Whether there was someone else out there, a man I didn't know, who might be my real father. But more than anything, I wondered if it mattered. Because whether I carried his blood or not, I carried his wounds. I carried his fear. I carried his words. And now, I carried his secret. I didn't tell my wife. Not yet. I didn't know how to say it out loud. But I started looking. Digging. Tracing names. Searching public records. Trying to find out who Elena was. What she meant to him. What she meant to me. Because stories don't break themselves. They get torn open. And I was holding the thread. Ready or not. Some truths come quietly. This one didn't. It came with shaking hands and a clenched jaw and the sound of my own voice cracking as I asked my mother a question I never thought I'd say aloud. Who is Elena? She was sitting on the couch, folding towels. Something mundane. Something ordinary. Her face didn't move right away. But I saw it. The shift in her eyes. The stillness that comes before the storm. Where did you hear that name? She asked, without looking at me. I held up the envelope. Not the letter itself. Just the wax seal, broken now. Fragile. From a letter Dad wrote. One I wasn't supposed to read. She closed her eyes. Took a breath that sounded like it had been waiting for years. Elena was a friend. She said finally. A friend I stopped talking to a long time ago. I didn't speak. I let the silence do the work. She was there when you were born. We used to be close. She knew everything. Including the part where he might not be my dad. There it was. The detonation. She flinched like I'd slapped her. The towel in her hands dropped to the floor. You read that? Yeah. I did. And I need you to tell me the truth now. Not the bedtime version. Not the edited story. The real one. Because I feel like I'm standing on a floor that might give out any second. She looked older all of a sudden. Smaller. Like the weight of the past was pulling her down. It was one night. She whispered. Just one. After a fight. I was angry. Scared. I didn't think he was coming back. And I made a mistake. Who was he? You don't know him. I barely did. It wasn't love. It wasn't anything. Just loneliness. I sat down across from her, the letter still in my hand. Did you tell him? Yes. Years later. After you were born. After he started pulling away. He asked me if it was his. I said I wasn't sure. I closed my eyes. Everything he wrote made sense now. The doubt. The guilt. The disappearance. Why didn't you tell me? She looked up at me, and her voice shook. Because you were a child. Because I didn't want to break your world. Because I thought it didn't matter. He was your father, Caleb. In every way that counted. He changed your diapers. He read to you. He kissed your forehead every night until the night he didn't. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears hit the paper. But he left. And now I'm stuck trying to piece together a story where every chapter is a different version of the same pain. She stood up slowly. There was a fight. You don't remember it. You were too young. But you heard it. You stood in the hallway crying while we screamed at each other. He said things he couldn't take back. So did I. What did you say? She swallowed. I said maybe it was better if he didn't come back. That you deserved better than a man who resented being your father. I blinked. A sound rose up in my ears. A hum. Pressure. Like static building in the back of my skull. And he left after that? No, she said. He stayed for one more night. Slept on the couch. In the morning you walked in, sat on his chest and said, "Don't go, Daddy." I couldn't breathe. I didn't remember that. Not even a glimpse. Then he kissed your forehead, she continued, her voice breaking, and walked out the door. Why don't I remember any of that? She turned away. Because you stopped talking after he left. For months. You didn't speak to anyone. The therapist said it was trauma. Your mind was protecting you. I stared at the floor. All those years I thought I was just too young to remember. But I had remembered. Somewhere deep down, my body had stored it. The silence. The ache. The loss. It had lived in me like a second heartbeat. Why didn't you tell me? I asked again. Because I didn't know how to fix it. She whispered. Because I didn't want you to grow up thinking you were a mistake. I stood up. Not in anger. Just in exhaustion. I need air. She didn't stop me. Outside, the wind was soft. The sky heavy. I sat on the steps and let the night wrap around me. I was unraveling. And underneath the thread was a boy I didn't know how to comfort. The one who cried in the hallway. The one who said, "Don't go, Daddy," and never saw him again. The one who went quiet for months because words couldn't hold the weight of what he lost. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and started talking. Not for him. For me. Because sometimes, the only way to get a memory back is to speak into the silence it left behind. I sent the DNA test in on a Thursday. It felt like betrayal. Not just to my mom. Not just to him. But to the story I had been telling myself since childhood, the one where I didn't need answers. The one where pain was a closed box, and I was safer not knowing what lived at the bottom of it. But then you read enough letters. You carry enough half-truths. And eventually, the questions get louder than the silence. 2 weeks later, the results came. It was quick. Clinical. A percentage and a name. There was no match. He wasn't my biological father. Just like the letter said. Just like my mother had finally admitted. But knowing didn't make it easier. It just made it real. He had raised me for 5 years. Taught me how to walk. Kissed scraped knees. Tucked me in. All while carrying a truth that rotted him from the inside out. And then one day he left. I wanted to hate him again. To scream. To curse him for not staying even though he didn't have to. For loving me in silence instead of with presence. But I couldn't. Because I understood him more now than I ever did. I started looking for the other man. The one my mom barely remembered. No name, just fragments. A face at a bar. A night she wished she could take back. It took months. I called in favors. Searched birth records. Reached out to Elena's sister, who had moved states away and hadn't spoken to my mom in over a decade. And eventually I found him. His name was Darren. He lived 2 towns over. I stared at the address for a full hour before I decided to drive there. Not because I needed a new father. But because I needed to see the man who, without ever knowing, helped shape the fault lines in my life. He opened the door with suspicion. Middle-aged. Soft in the face. He looked tired, like life had taken more than it gave. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I think you might be my father," I said. Just like that. No build-up. No preamble. Because there was no way to make it easier. His eyes widened. A breath caught. "What?" "My name's Caleb. My mother's name is Rebecca. I was born 34 years ago. You met her once. Maybe you don't remember. But I took a test. And it pointed to you." He didn't deny it. Not really. He asked to sit down. Invited me in. Made coffee he didn't drink. We sat across from each other like strangers who shared a shadow. He asked questions. I answered. I asked some back. He stumbled through them. Said he never knew. That if he had, maybe things would have been different. But I didn't feel anything. No spark. No recognition. No shift. Just numbness. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't much of anything, really. Just a man who had a piece of my biology. That was it. No memories. No letters. No love. I left after an hour. He asked if I'd stay in touch. I said maybe. But I knew I wouldn't. Because blood isn't the whole story. And the more I looked back, the more I realized I wasn't looking for a new father. I was trying to forgive the one who stepped into the role and then disappeared. And the only way I knew how to do that was to be better for my own son. To be more than blood. To be presence. To be proof that a man doesn't have to stay to shape you. But when he does, when he chooses to, that's what makes him a father. I drove home in silence. Windows down. Air thick. And when I walked through the door, my son ran into my arms. Daddy! You're back! And that was it. That was everything. No test result could change that. Because he didn't care who my father was. He only cared that I was his. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. It circles. Like a tide that keeps coming back, dragging pieces of you with it. Just when you think you've figured out how to stand again, something pulls at your ankles. For me, that pull came with a voicemail. It was late. I was digging through old boxes in the attic, trying to find my high school yearbook for my son's family tree project. I found it next to an old phone. One of those brick-style flip phones we used to think were indestructible. The kind you forgot you ever owned until you heard the soft click of plastic in your hand. I plugged it in out of curiosity. The screen flickered to life. Old text messages. Photos from a time that didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. But it was the voicemail icon that stopped me. One new message. I pressed play. Static. Then breathing. Then his voice. Hey, Caleb. I don't know if this number still works. I wasn't even sure I should call. But it's your birthday. And I figured if I didn't do it now, I never would. I froze. I know you probably hate me. You have every right to. I was a coward. I let fear win. And the worst part is, I thought it was love. I thought disappearing would protect you. That if I wasn't around, maybe you wouldn't carry my damage. His voice cracked. But I was wrong. God, I was wrong. Because the silence? That became its own kind of wound. And you didn't deserve that. I sat down on the attic floor, phone pressed to my ear, like if I held it close enough I could time travel. You were never a mistake. No matter what your mother said. No matter what I feared. You were the best thing I ever touched. Even if it was only for a little while. A pause. I don't expect a call back. I don't even know if this message will reach you. But I wanted to try. One last time. Because if there's any chance you'll forgive me, any chance you'll understand. I need you to hear this. I loved you. I love you. That never stopped. Another breath. Long, slow. Happy birthday, son. Click. The silence that followed felt heavier than his words. I sat there in the dark, years collapsing around me. Every letter, every fight, every second guessing of who I was and where I came from, it all landed in that one message. He called. He tried. Even if it was too late. I don't remember when I started crying. Only that I didn't stop for a long time. That message didn't erase the pain. It didn't bring him back. But it gave me something I never thought I'd get. Closure? Maybe. But more than that, it gave me a piece of him that was real. Not ink. Not speculation. Not filtered through memory or myth. Just his voice. Just him. I played the message again. Then again. I saved it to my laptop. To the cloud. To every device I owned. Because I couldn't lose it. Not now. Not after all of this. Later that night I sat with my wife. Told her everything. From the letters to the DNA test to the visit with the man who shared my blood but not my life. And then I played the voicemail for her. She cried too. He tried, she said. And that was the hardest part. Because trying matters. But sometimes it's not enough. Still, hearing him say the word son, not on a page, but out loud, was something I didn't know I needed until I had it. The next morning, I sat my own son down. He was too young to understand it all. But I told him a story. A true one. About a man who was afraid. About a boy who waited. And about a moment, one message, that helped him feel whole again. He looked up at me with wide eyes and said, "I won't ever leave you, Daddy. Even if I get scared." I hugged him tight. "And I won't ever leave you either. Not ever. Not even if I mess up. Because being a father isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. Even if it's too late. Even if all you can do is leave one last message. And hope it finds the right ears." It found mine. His name was Darren. The man who gave me his DNA. The one who, according to a lab test and a single night that should have never happened, was my biological father. The one my mother barely remembered and the one I had met once now, briefly, with nothing exchanged but questions we couldn't answer. But something about that meeting stuck in me. Not because of what it was, but because of what it wasn't. So I went back. Not for him. For me. I needed to see it again. To know if what I felt that day was real or imagined. To know if I had missed something, a spark, a connection, a reason. He met me at a diner off the highway. No big talk this time. Just two men sitting across from each other with cups of coffee going cold between them. "So what now?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. He nodded like that was the only right answer. "You have kids?" I asked. "3, he said. "All grown. Grandkids, too." I waited. But he didn't ask about mine. He didn't ask about my childhood. Or the man who raised me. Or the years in between. He just stirred his coffee with a spoon and looked at the window like the silence outside was more interesting than anything between us. Eventually, I said it. "You could have looked for me." His eyes flicked up. "I didn't know. But you could have known. If you wanted to." He didn't argue. Didn't apologize either. "Would it have made a difference?" he asked. "Me being around?" I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to say it would have changed everything. That maybe I wouldn't have felt like a shadow in my own home. That maybe I would have grown up with answers instead of echoes. But I didn't. Because it wouldn't have. Not if he was the same man I saw now. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unkind. But he was absent. Even when he was right in front of me. Like talking to wallpaper. Like trying to hold smoke. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. The man who raised me, Eric, he might not have shared my blood. But he tried. Even when he failed. Even when he ran. He carried guilt. Wrote letters. Left voicemails. Loved me in the only ways he knew how, even if they were broken and late. This man? Darren? He wasn't there. Not then. Not now. Not really. We sat in silence for another few minutes. Then I stood. "I appreciate you meeting me," I said. He looked like he was about to say something. Maybe offer a number. An invitation. A second chance. But he didn't. He just nodded. And that was the last time I saw him. I drove home, the sky bleeding dusk across the horizon. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused. I felt clear. Because family isn't made from a test. It's made from effort. From staying. Showing up. Saying the words even when your voice shakes. Eric failed in so many ways. But at least he left behind pieces of himself. Pages. Sentences. A voicemail I still played when I needed to remember that even broken love is still love. Darren left behind nothing. And maybe that was a gift, too. A clean break. No more questions. No more wondering. Just a final, quiet answer. He wasn't there. And I didn't need him to be. I had built my life without him. And now I knew exactly how not to be. When I got home, my son was waiting on the porch. "Where'd you go, Daddy?" I knelt in front of him. Just taking care of the past, bud. So I can be here. With you. He smiled and held out his hand. Come see the rocket I made. I took his hand in mine. And I followed him. Into the future. One step at a time. The box still sits in my closet. Tucked in the back behind a winter coat I never wear. 37 letters, neatly stacked. Some opened so many times the folds are worn thin. Others still sealed. Still waiting. Maybe forever. I haven't read them all. And maybe I never will. Because I know now that the truth isn't always something you find in someone else's handwriting. Sometimes, it's something you create for yourself. This morning, before the sun came up, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a pen in my hand. My son turned 6 last week. He asked me if I'd still love him when he was as old as me. Longer, I said. I'll love you longer than time itself. He laughed, not knowing what a promise that was. So I started a new tradition. 1 letter. Each year. For him. Not to be opened now. Not for a while. But one day, when I'm not around to explain myself. When he's staring down the same questions I once had. When maybe he's a father himself, unsure and overwhelmed. I'll be there. In ink. In pages. In presence. The first letter was simple. My son. You are not a mistake. You are not too much. You are not too hard to love. If you ever feel like running, I hope you stop and remember this. I stayed. Even when I was tired. Even when I was scared. Even when I didn't know what I was doing. I stayed. Not because I was strong. But because you were worth it. You still are. Love. Dad****. I folded it, dated it, and slipped it into an envelope. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out a shoebox, and dropped it in. It'll fill slowly year by year. A record of love that never had to wonder if it was enough. Not perfect. Not poetic. Just real. The kind of love that doesn't vanish in doorways. The kind that stays. I think about my father sometimes. About Eric. The man who loved me the best way he could, even when he was breaking. I don't hate him anymore. I don't worship him either. He was a chapter. A necessary one. Without him, I wouldn't be here. But the man I've become, that's mine. Built from silence and stitched back together with choice. There are still nights when I hear his voice in that voicemail. Still days when I hold one of his letters and let it ache a little. But that ache doesn't own me now. It fuels me. Because I get to do what he couldn't. I get to stay. I get to write. And one day, when my son opens those letters, I hope he doesn't cry the way I did. I hope he smiles. I hope he sees a man who tried. Not perfectly. But fully. Because the truth is, we all carry ghosts. But we also get to choose the legacy we leave behind. And mine? It won't be silence. It will be words. It will be love. It will be letters he will read. Every one of them.